problem isn't that black people aren't competent. The problem isn't that black countries aren't competent. The problem isn't that we don't produce things. The problem isn't that necessarily that we're not educated enough. Those aren't necessarily the problems. The problem is that we're producing great things, we're building great things, we're doing great things, but we very rarely own those things.
Finally made it, we live, we live, we live, we made it, we live. We finally made it, we live. We finally made it, we live. Yeah, not many people know what it is to be right here. I told them this whole year that this was my year. I do it forever, I do it, I swear. Cause I come from it.
Good evening, Turks and Caicos, and welcome to another episode of Trailblazing Chats. Today, we have a special guest based in America. Justin Blue is an activist with a strong following on social media. His work focuses on racial equality and other social issues. Here in the Turks and Caicos Islands, we have a lot of social issues. Not only that, we have a lot of young men that's searching for ways to be empowered, that's searching for their identity, that's looking for their place in the world. And I believe that Justin Blue can give us an insight as to how we can find ourselves and also what steps we can be taking to live better and more purposeful lives. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome Justin Blue to Trailblazing Chats.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to just getting into the conversation, looking forward to building, sharing information, sharing ideas, and really just doing something great during this time.
Amazing. Now, Justin, there's many people that's listening in right now that probably don't know who you are. So can you tell the audience about yourself? And also, how did you become an activist for racial equality and social justice issues?
So I identify more as a life coach and a philosopher, though, since I care about the community and since most of my work is focused on Black community in the States, but also internationally, I oftentimes receive the activist title. And there's nothing wrong with that, though. I have this other quote where the best way to be an activist is probably not to be an activist. And it's nothing against those who have that title, but what I'm pointing out is maybe you're great with business and you place your focus there. Now you've placed your focus on business, you're in a position to go and fund certain things, to fund certain movements, or maybe build a school or help certain communities, or maybe you're a great artist and so you focus on that and you're operating under the artist title. Though there may be other things that you care about, other initiatives that you care about, and you're able to take either the skills or the resources that you acquire using your skill set in that realm in order to pour into activism. So for myself, in life coaching, in giving advice, in sharing ideas, I've been able to give a lot of help and breakdown regarding things that are going on in our communities, and also to shed light on certain issues and really to provide great perspective. Over the course of the last 3 to 4 years, I've built a large following online. I've been on MTV's The Real World, where I've talked about many social issues affecting Black communities internationally there, and just been continuing to create events and courses and programs and speaking that is progressing everyone. So that's a little bit of who I am.
And you know what started this for you, Justin? What triggered this fire?
So it's a trick question because we all have specific callings regarding our life. Like we're all here for specific reasons. The creator is very intentional about everything. If you look at the moon, the stars, the grass, the ecosystem, even how your heart pumps blood through your body, every single thing about your experience here on this planet and even down to your own anatomy is very intentional. And so our existence is intentional too. So I believe we all have various callings that we're only we can carry out. And there's different life experiences that may spark us into going deeper into those directions. For me, it was dealing with being exposed to corrupt policing within my university. I went to Florida International University, and there was early morning. It was about 1:40 in the morning, and we get pulled over by these two white officers, and they were essentially trying to arrest us on trumped up charges, and eventually they ended up letting us go. But it was so eye-opening that experience caused me to dig deeper into systemic oppression. It caused me to dig deeper into colonization. It caused me to dig deeper into poverty and what are the things that have caused poverty, and why is poverty affecting our communities the most oftentimes. And so it's just a snowball effect that was sparked from that experience, and it's led to so many other things.
You said something. You said something along the lines of poverty and why it impacts our communities. I'm gonna touch on that much later on in the chat, but I want to also just try to understand Justin a bit more. I want my audience to really know who Justin is. What has been the hardest challenge you've overcome in your life? I know you talked about being pulled over by the police and other things that you faced in regards to discrimination, but you personally, what has been the hardest challenge you've had to overcome in your life?
It's been mental health. And the fact that I feel that that's been the hardest challenge that I've had to overcome in my life, I know how serious it is for others. I identify myself as someone who's very strong mentally. In fact, people come to me in droves for my thoughts. People admire me for the way that I think. People want to speak to me for how I end up, getting paid to speak. I end up on shows to speak. I end up just in various situations to share my thoughts. And for me to have to fight to make sure that my mental health is good on a regular basis, and it's continuous. It's not something that just stops. It's something that's ongoing. Indeed. But for that to be a large struggle within my own life, it really has caused me to realize how much of a bigger deal it is for everyone else. And we currently live in a time period where we're exposed to so much information. We're exposed to so many people's opinions. We're exposed to just so much content and all these things. And our brain is picking it up on a regular basis. We're picking up everything. For example, I could show you a meme today. I could show you a meme, or I could show you a funny video today. And 30 years from now, if someone walks up to you and they show you that same meme or they show you that same video, you may say, I've already seen that.
Yeah.
Now, if that's just one piece of content where I can show it to you 10, 20, 30 years from now, and you say, I've seen that before. The average person is consuming hundreds of pieces of new content every single day. And similar to cigarettes in an earlier time period, we don't necessarily know what this does to our mind.
Indeed.
We're still in a place where we're figuring out what does all this do to our mind? How does this add to our anxieties? How does this add to our life pressures? How does this add to our envies? How does this add to our insecurities? We don't fully know yet. It's still that fresh. And so for myself, being someone, I've amassed a relatively large following online, being on MTV's The Real World, and being shown in front of hundreds of thousands or millions of people, and you have all these people that you don't know who have these great opinions about you. We're all human at the end of the day. And it's only so much that a person can take in and also experience before it starts to take a toll on your mind. So that's been the biggest thing within my life, is making sure my mental health is right. And also, I think tying into that, one of the hardest things I've had to deal with in life is coming to the conclusion that it's okay to not be okay. And that is so hard.
It's okay to not be okay.
It's okay to not be okay. Think about how many people have asked you how you're doing. And when's the last time you ever said, I'm not doing good?
Right. And I guess it's because you don't want to feel like you're raining on someone's parade by saying, I'm really having a crappy day.
Right. But nobody's having amazing days 365.
That's true too.
Well, people are having amazing days, but to say that you're having amazing days 365 days out the year, like everyone, if you're a human being, we know that's not correct. Now,
That's not
we
sustainable.
we
Yeah.
we all have things to be grateful for. If you're breathing, there's definitely things to be grateful for. But what is hurting us so much is since there still is a social taboo around saying you're not okay, or at least we feel as if we can't express that we're not okay at times when we're not okay to the people around us and the ones that we love. It can really wear down on us, and we kind of can find ourselves in a society where everyone is wearing a mask, and so everyone thinks everyone around them is okay, while at the same time everyone around them may really just be hurting and wearing a mask. And so we need to get to a place of being able to share how we actually feel. And I think that starts with the understanding that you're only human, and it's okay to have those moments where it's like, hey, I might need help, or I might need to go seek a therapist, or I may need to reach out to my support system to get better clarity or perspective on things.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Trailblazing Chats. I'm your host, Leo Lightburn, and I have with me today Justin Blue. And we're just getting started. And, Justin, I want to, again, we're getting to know you here in the Turks and Caicos Island.
Sure.
So my next question to you is, who is that one person you admired the most, dead or alive, growing up?
Okay, the one person I admired the most growing up, I'm going to give two answers to this. First, it was the entrepreneurs around me in the community, because I admired their freedom. Yes, they're working. Yes, they may not have as much money as they desire, but they're choosing their own schedules. And so it was the barbers who decide, hey, I get to clock in at this time and I get to leave out at the other time. Small local producers who may not have the most money, may not be driving the nicest car, but they're doing what they love. They're operating in their passion, and then they're also working on their own schedule. And so from a early age, it's been those entrepreneurs that have inspired me the most, because in my adulthood, just thriving in that area, thriving and achieving my freedom, and being able to spend my time and operating my passion throughout my life, that's been part of my mission. But a second answer that's more specific, I would say my mom. I admire my mom a lot because of just what she's overcome. She grew up in poverty. She grew up in poverty. She never knew her father. She lived with my aunt, and she tells stories about when they used to be in the field picking oranges, and just a great struggle that she had. My mom, she got pregnant at 14 or 15. Not with myself. I have an older brother, though. She still went to college. She still got her bachelor's degree. She's currently working at the top of her career field, and
Wow.
She overcame so many obstacles that when I think about myself and just my own progress, and during times where I want to give up, I think about my mom, and I do feel as if we all have excuses, but still at the end of the day, what are we gonna do? So
Right.
my mom's been
Right.
huge.
I'm a huge advocate for single parent mothers. Did you come from a single parent household, if you don't mind me asking?
No, so for
Okay.
me, I didn't come from a single parent household, but I came from a separated household. And
Separated. Okay.
they're both I would say forms of trauma in a way, or there's things that could be done better in both of those scenarios.
Right.
But I have an interesting outlook because I spent a large portion of my youth in my father's household. So between the age of 5 to 16, I lived in my father's household, but up to about 1 to 5, I was in my mom's household, and then from 16 to 18, before going off to college, I was in my mom's household. But my father's household, that was a 2-parent home. My mom's household, she was the matriarch within that house, and I got to see how both of those systems kind of run within those two households. So, but being a child in the midst of it though, that was a lot of stress, and we can get into that too. But
Indeed.
there's a lot of stress and trauma that comes along with having separated parents. So,
Yeah, the whole idea of this program is to assist young men,
mm-hmm.
and I think we have to. The best place to start with is history, and understanding how we got here. We got here through slavery. Especially with the Caribbean, colonialization played a major role in how we got to the West. Now we've passed those days, and a lot of people like to echo the phrase that we might be freed physically, but we are mentally enslaved. And that comes with a whole heap of reasons why we're not excelling.
Mm-hmm.
From your perspective, Justin, what impact has slavery and colonization had on Black people in the West?
Oh, it's been tremendous. Though I think the largest portion of it, ironically, is that we give slavery and colonization too much credit for our existence in this space. It's been documented that we were traveling and selling and exploring the world far before colonizers even knew about the Americas or what really existed over here, or before they were exploring. During the same time period where they thought the world was flat, we knew the world wasn't flat. We already began traveling hundreds of thousands of years before they even made it over to various parts of the world. That's why when, for example, something that's not talked about is there was already millions of people in the Americas before it was quote unquote discovered. So, and if you look at the Egyptian pyramids and you look at the Mayan pyramids, you'll see a lot of parallels, a lot of commonalities. If you look at various forms of spirituality over from Africa and that already was in the Americas before colonization occurred, you'll see that it may not have been specifically the same exact, but there's a lot of parallels. There's a lot of things that reflect one another. So we give colonization too much credit for our existence in this space, and many times we do so to point out the wrongs and the atrocities that have been done to us, not realizing that simultaneously we're taking away the credit of our own greatness.
Indeed.
So that's a start there of there's an emphasis on slavery and the slave trade, but there really should be more emphasis on, like, there's a quote where it says, slavery isn't Black history, slavery interrupted Black history. And when you get more of that perspective, you'll start to view yourself differently. When you start to understand that I come from a people that have been doing great things and are still continuing to do great things, then you understand who you are. But many times we have more of the perspective of, okay, my ancestors were slaves. If you think your ancestors are slaves, then already in your subconscious mind, you're thinking of yourself as being weak. But if my father was a doctor, and my grandfather was a doctor, and my great-grandfather was a doctor, and my great-great-grandfather was a doctor, and I have this whole lineage of doctors, there's no skepticism in my mind about whether or not I have the ability to be a doctor. But for many of us, and I'm speaking on from an international perspective, for many of us, it's okay. My father didn't have anything. My great father didn't have anything. My great-great-grandfather didn't have anything. Or you could replace that with my great-grandfather didn't contribute anything. Whichever negative thing you want to place there, many times we have that as a people, and mentally we're viewing it that way. So we're thinking less of ourselves than we really are. So the history is very important to dive into and to understand that you come from an extremely powerful people. It's just much of it has been hidden from you, similar to how the circus master hides the identity of a lion from the lion inside the ring.
Justin, you mentioned something, and you talked about how we tend to start our history with slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this reinforced in movies and in the media? Why does it seem like nobody wants to talk about the things that's done before slavery? Why is it always every year a new movie about slavery, or just constantly reminding us about this time in our period?
I think the simple answer to it is by looking at who writes the check,
Mm,
who funds the movie, and
mm,
who's making money off of the movies.
right.
And
Okay.
I think that's a large portion of the answer, because many times when it comes to mainstream media, a lot of the large media that's being disseminated throughout the world isn't controlled by us, and so there's many other groups who are depicting our stories and also telling our story to us, and we end up regurgitating it among ourselves.
Thank you. And you know, we're based in the Turks and Caicos Islands, right? And the Turks and Caicos Islands is still considered to be we are a British overseas territory. Question now, this is
Yes,
very
yes,
important because we've had politicians talk about this, and they might be listening in right now as we
for sure.
as this. Yeah, should we be aiming for independence? One, as a British overseas territory, given everything that you said previously, and the second is, if so, how should we be preparing for independence?
So there's a business term. It's I believe it's called vertical integration. And Nipsey Hussle talks about it, and that's one of the things that made him stand out as a businessman. Is he would talk about vertical integration within his business, and vertical integration is basically just taking all the things that are necessary to make your business function, and instead of having to outsource those things, you begin being able to do that yourself. So you're not relying on essentially anyone else, or you're cutting down how much outside sources you have to rely on as much as possible in order to take care of things. So let's say you had a t-shirt company. T-shirt company, you need to buy t-shirts, you need to go to a place to get t-shirts, and you're probably going to go to someone else to have printing of the logos put on the t-shirts. You might go to another place to get unique tags to put on the back of the shirts, and so on and so forth. Maybe the packaging, you have to go to another company to get the packaging done, and all these things are required in order to get that shirt to the consumer in its final form. Vertical integration is when, okay, now you might even be making the shirts yourself. You may buy the press machine in order to put the logos on the shirt yourself. You're creating the tags yourself. You have a shipping program down within your company, so now you're able to ship out without having to go to someone else. And so everything is within your company. You're basically able to function independently. And so when it comes to the concept of a country pushing for independence, it's important to be able to actually stand independently. I think the simplest way to break it down is before a child leaves a house, like you might turn whatever age and you feel as if you're grown enough to handle your own affairs, live on your own, etc. You can beg your parents to let you go live on your own. You can
Right.
fight them even if you want to, but it's no good to you if you haven't made sure you're in a position to actually stand on your own and take
Indeed.
care of yourself. And so in
Indeed.
a general sense, and this is recommended in for this question, but in a broad sense, it's important to make sure that you're able to go and take care of yourself before even fighting the parents about independence. Make sure you're in a state where you can be independent, or you're able
Right.
to be independent.
Right. And listening to you talk, a lot of it is more so us leaning more towards being owners um, of and being more in control of the business community. You know, case in point, having a t-shirt company, but also looking much deeper and saying, okay, um, how can I actually own the material of this shirt? Is that the mindset that's required for us first before we start to look at independence in this country?
I think the goal should always be to strive towards independence, whether this is on a from well actually I'll take that back. Let me make sure I'm being specific here. So the most effective the most effective way to grow and build is actually interdependence. And there tends to be this emphasis on independence because independence is a result of the backlash of a time period where we were dependent. But interdependence is when you're strong enough to do everything by yourself, but you also see the value in relying on others and trusting others and cooperating with others and building with others in order to do things that you could never do by yourself. So independence is important for individuals from a country standpoint, from a community standpoint. Independence is extremely important, or at least being able to be independent is extremely important. But once you pass that phase of accomplishing that, the highest level of effectiveness is interdependence, where it's like, yes, I know I'm able to stand on my own, though I know I can get greater things done if I'm working with other people that understand I'm also in a position to be respected.
Right. Right. You know, I recently read that when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863, Blacks in America owned a total of 0.5% of the total wealth in the United States. More than 150 years later, that number has barely budged. Blacks own about 1% of the wealth in the United States today.
Mm-hmm.
Why haven't these numbers improved in spite Blacks being more educated and having more access to opportunities? It's the first question I'm going to ask you. The second one is, what steps should they be taking to control wealth in that country, but more so here in the Turks and Caicos Islands? Because even though this is a Black country, most of the wealth are controlled by people who don't look like us, who don't understand our culture. But yet, most of the wealth in this country is controlled by them. So I know this question starts off with America, but I also want you to also consider Turks and Caicos Islands and your response as well.
All right, so it's a very loaded question. Very
Loaded.
First off, when it comes to education, being educated is important. Being educated is very important. But something that Black people specifically that we haven't understood for a long time, and I'm speaking more so from an American perspective, but I know that most of our education systems are based off of the Greeks and Romans, and so there's a lot of parallels in just how education internationally or higher education is done. One of the biggest tricks that we fell for is that degrees were going to lead to wealth. It's not that Black people didn't know how to do the jobs or how to do the work. If you really think about it, we were the ones that were doing almost all the work. That's why they went to grab us for slavery and they enslaved us in the first place, is because they knew that we were competent of learning and doing the work and that we had skill sets. We are a people who are able to get things done. It wasn't a matter of whether or not we could get things done or whether or not we were educated about how to thrive. We've been educated about agriculture and whatever the various things are within our space, we've been educated on. But higher education has been used to create different levels of elitism. So for a long time, we didn't have access to these higher institutions, and that created a great excuse to say, hey, well, you don't have the certificate, now we can't let you in. But the trick is, look at this. Now more people are gaining more degrees than ever. We're taking out more student loans than ever, and we're still in the same position. It's because the piece of paper was never what was stopping us from being in those positions. It was them maintaining power, and that was just the excuse in front of it. So it's you get your bachelor's degree, and they say, okay, you're not qualified enough, you got to go back. So you get your master's degree. After you get your master's degree, they say, oh, well, hey, it's still not enough. You go and get your PhD. Now you're overqualified. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to college. I'm not saying that you shouldn't study, but I am saying that it's never been a matter of us not knowing how to get things done effectively. There's a system in place, and it's almost as if we've been chasing a dollar on a string when when really there's been an illusion on that. We've been competent, we've been capable. Going into the second part of the question of Black Americans, and why is it essentially that Black Americans are still in the same place today as they were during the Emancipation Proclamation? I'm very happy you asked this question because mainstream media pits us against each other. So from the Black American perspective, Black Americans tend not to travel that much. So a lot of times we're watching the media, and it's easy for us to look at the continent of Africa, to look at the Caribbean, and to look down on those places and those groups because we're being fed biased information by the mainstream media. But on the flip side, people in the continent of Africa, people in the Caribbean, and people throughout the diaspora everywhere else, they're receiving biased negative information about Black Americans. So when we meet each other, we're looking at each other in a negative way, and we're not understanding the true history or culture of either one of us. So for Black Americans, though, many people are familiar with Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they called it Black Wall Street, and it was a thriving city, and it was literally bombed. And to this day, they're fighting for that land. And a lot of times we'll refer back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, but there were hundreds of Tulsa, Oklahoma situations throughout America. There's been many thriving Black cities that were literally bombed or shot up, or these people or intentionally burnt down by the neighboring white people within the spaces. And even when it comes to thriving Black communities today, we're still dealing with gentrification, etc. And so from what's very important for people, for Black Americans to understand, and also Black people internationally to understand, especially when coming in contact with Black people, is that this is not a group of lazy people that haven't been doing anything the whole time. This is a group of people that has been very resilient and have been fighting and making progress and going into politics. But then there's also been a lot of oppressive situations that have continually found tricky, unique ways to push this group of people back. For example, if you read The New Jim Crow, The New Jim Crow is a book. It talks about basically the new slavery in America. And I'll just ask you, do you know, is slavery legal in America? I'll ask you that for starts.
It's not legal.
It is legal if you're incarcerated. That's essentially the one exception for slavery in America is through incarceration. So, all right, slavery isn't legal, though it is through this loophole of incarceration. So if we still need slaves, all we need to do is incarcerate more Black people. So if you look at America, America has the largest prison system in the history of mankind. And a bulk of the people in there are Black and brown. It's no coincidence. Even larger portion of them are in there for drug-related things. But studies have shown that white people statistically are likely to use and sell the same amount of drugs as Black people, if not more. So if the statistics are saying that these groups are likely to participate statistically in the same amount of crime in a specific area, but then the extreme bulk of the people who are incarcerated for this are Black and brown, the math between the laws and the crime and what's really going on doesn't add up. And it's due to, you still need free labor. You still have a class of people that benefit through racism. And there's still this ongoing struggle of the haves and the have-nots and maintaining power. So it gets very complex.
What should we, Justin? What should we be doing? Like, I would like for when I have children. I mean, 1%, I mean, it's not much control. It's no control at all. I would love for that number to be two double digits when I have children, or whenever my children reach my age. What can we be doing to prepare the next generation to be more in control of their destinies, or more so wealth in the
So,
country?
um, you asking me that question, it reminded me that there was a second part of the question that I didn't get to. That's very important.
Mm.
Um, so I mentioned to you how there's been many self-sufficient, thriving cities in America that have been owned and managed by Black people, and that they have been taken away.
Uh-huh.
When you acquire things of value, or you build things of value, it is also equally as important for you to be in a position to protect those things. And so I'm speaking from an individual place, but I'm also speaking from a country place. If you have a country that acquires things of value, and is if you have great things, you need to be also in a position to secure those things and protect those things. So from a political place, that's what I advise for anyone that's listening, that's in a position to take heed to that, is there's two parts to this equation. It's just like why do we have banks? We have banks because we give them the money with the expectation that they'll protect it. So you may have partially an obligation of acquiring these assets, but then you also have this other part that's not talked about as much, which is making sure that you're in a position to protect these things. So, and I can roll right into the second question as well if you don't have anything else.
Oh, go ahead. Go right ahead.
And then you're asking, how can things be different regarding the future
Yeah,
generations?
how can we increase those numbers?
Ownership. So which ties into what I'm saying about like being able to protect what you have as well, though. So the problem isn't that Black people aren't competent. The problem isn't that Black countries aren't competent. The problem isn't that we don't produce things. The problem isn't that necessarily that we're not educated enough. Those aren't necessarily the problems. The problem is that we're producing great things, we're building great things, we're doing great things, but we very rarely own those things. And so, for the amount of wealth to change from a global perspective, this, it could be more so national, but even from a global perspective, is we need to start owning the work that we're doing, owning the things that we're doing, and maintaining the ownership of it. That's where the real wealth is. That's where you can pass things down generationally. And that's where we're not starting from square one every single generation. Most of our generations are starting off almost as if they're first generation immigrants to a new land. We have to break that cycle, and we're only going to be able to really do that through ownership. And that doesn't mean that if you're working a 9-to-5 job or a regular job that you need to stop working for a company that you enjoy working for. That doesn't necessarily mean that, but it does mean that, all right, do that, but find something to own for yourself. That way you're in a position to be able to pass it down to the next generation. So now you have generations that are building upon one another rather than starting from square one every single time. You could work for a company for 40 years, but your child turns 18 or 19 or 20 or whatever age, and they need a job. You still have to go through protocols and ask somebody else, hey, do you think that you could possibly hire my child? We need to be able to have tangible things or tangible assets that we can say, hey, I have this for you. I'm gonna pass this to you, build upon it. So if you want to see better for your child and your grandchildren, it's have things that you can pass down and say, okay, we own this as a family or a unit, go build upon it.
I love that. A huge component of maintaining wealth is, and this is my opinion, is maintaining mental health, and you touched on that. You know, if your mental health is in disarray, then you're gonna lose that wealth.
For
You
sure.
know, and according to statistics, Black adults are more likely to report persistent symptoms of emotional distress, such as sadness and feeling like everything is an effort. Black adults living below the poverty line are more than twice as likely to report serious psychological distress as those with more financial security. Why don't we take our mental health seriously in our community?
Um, okay. There's so many layers to it. Part of it is internationally, Black people tend to be extremely religious, and our spiritual perspectives and beliefs, um, they've helped us cope and get through so many things, but we're so used to solely relying on that in order to get through hard times that we don't take into account that there's other resources that we could be using, and it creates a great taboo among us culturally, because someone may be struggling with depression or mental health issues, and instead of taking them to a therapist, we'll say, okay, well, maybe that's the devil, so we're going to take you to church. And nothing against the pastors. There's some amazing pastors that provide amazing leadership, but sometimes you need a specialist. Sometimes you need someone that has gone to school specifically for this area of help. The other thing is, um, historically, we've had to just be strong throughout so many things. Think about a plantation. Um, it's not like mental health has just become something that's affecting people. It's just that now we finally have time to say something about it. On a plantation, no matter what you're going through, you're not in a position necessarily to say, "Oh, hey, I'm suffering with anxiety. It's crippling me," or um, I'm depressed out here. You're not in a position to really deal with those things, and so a lot of those a lot of those ways of coping and dealing with life, they carry over to modern times of how we deal with things today. So it's going to be slow, because the shifts of culture are something that take time. Culture is something
Indeed.
that it doesn't just change overnight. Though over time we need to just get to a deeper understanding of what I said earlier in this, is that it's okay to not be
Be
okay.
okay.
It's
Yeah.
it's okay to go and get help when you need it. One of
Yeah.
the books, a book that may help, is a book called The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health.
Never
And
heard about that.
yeah, the Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. I recommend that book because it gives you tips on how to deal with your own mental health, but then also how to help those around you who may be dealing with various things mental health wise. And um, being black is rough. In fact, being black is so rough that it's one of the key points that we kind of connect to about whether or not we identify a person as being black. It's like, oh, you didn't struggle, so I don't know. You're not really black. You didn't struggle enough.
That's true.
It's
That's true. Yeah.
that's a whole nother problem. We could address that as well. We shouldn't be identifying blackness through how much have you struggled, though. There is that reality that currently, that culturally, that is one of the ways that we kind of identify a person as being one of us. Like, how much of the struggle did you have to go through? Not
Right.
saying that's healthy, but being black is that rough to where whether or not you've had hard times often is how a person identifies whether or not they view you as being black in their eyes. So
Right.
it does say something about how rough that is.
Like the ass on our chest being struggle as opposed to Superman.
Right. It's even when we talk about like Pan-Africanism, or connecting on a global level, we'll talk about, hey, we have this common struggle. So if
Right.
if there's this common struggle, then it already implies or lets you know that there's something about this that isn't necessarily easy in comparison to other other people or other groups. So we go through a lot,
Right.
and we're human beings. And going back into history too, um, we're so used to not being treated like human beings that it trickles over into our expectations upon ourselves.
You know, I hear a lot of, you know, black activists or thought leaders talk about the term generational trauma. Um, what does generational trauma mean to you, Justin?
I'll Okay, so I'll give you an example of just a transfer of energy. And so energy is not created nor destroyed, it's only transferred. So let's say you go into work and the boss is just going off on you. The boss is yelling at you, they're treating you horrible. Then you have to go deal with the client or someone else. And it's just a horrible day. It's just a really bad day. And then you end up going home. And you might have a child or you might have a significant other. And they do that one thing that really just annoys you all the time. But today specifically is just not the day for it. So they do that thing that gets on your nerves. You lash out on them or at them. You know, they might respond back to you or however they respond. But now that energy from work has been taken over to your child or your significant other. And now this child or this significant other, now they have this energy. The significant, you know, if you have a wife, she might she might leave the house and now she's driving down the street. She has road rage because of what just happened at the house. So now she's cursing out people in the car. She's cutting people off. The person just got cut off that was driving. Now they're angry. So you having this experience at work from your boss, which your boss might have just had a whole entire he might have a whole nother story about how he picked up that energy. So you picked up this energy from your boss, you took it home. The people from your home, now they're taking it back out into the world. It's being passed on. When it comes to generational trauma, similar things are occurring. If my grandfather was abusive to my father and my father never went and got help, at the very least, there's going to be remnants of the abuse that he experienced that are going to be passed down to me. And if I don't get help, then the same thing will occur for my children and so on and so forth. And so that's just one form, but we have trauma as far as what we fear. We have trauma, like generational trauma about what we're afraid of. We have generational trauma about what we think our limits are. We have generational trauma economically. You know, if my dad knows about money and I grew up in a household where people were making great financial decisions, then I'm probably going to grow into an adult that makes great financial decisions, and my child is going to make great financial decisions as well.
I've seen that.
Though, on the flip side, as far as generational trauma, if I grew up in a household where, just like many of us, our parents don't know anything about money for the most part, outside of maybe just go to work, get your check, pay your bills, you know, maybe splurge a little bit and then go back into work. Outside of that, most of us, we don't really have financial literacy for real in a lot of our households. So the father doesn't know what he's doing, therefore the son doesn't know what he's doing. And then when that son has children, those children a lot of times don't know what they're doing either, unless someone goes and breaks that cycle. So someone becomes intentional about focusing on their mental health, breaking that cycle. Someone becomes intentional about learning about financial literacy, breaking that cycle. Another form of generational trauma is our eating habits and our health. So, for example, in the United States, soul food is a big thing, especially when it comes to African Americans. Soul food is very big. And so for generations upon generations, we've been eating soul food. And fairly recently, in the last couple decades, people have been pointing out, hey, like, it's maybe not best to eat the intestines that come from a pig, especially the ones that come from the butt. Yeah, like, what, you know, you're literally eating the anus of a pig. Maybe that's not what we should be doing anymore. Or maybe we shouldn't be frying every single thing we eat or putting big, huge blocks of butter in all of our food. But that's a form of generational trauma. because there was a time period where we had to figure out how to make those parts of the pig work, how to feed ourselves off of those parts of the pig, or how to feed ourselves off of, what are we going to cook with? And so we're really throwing things together. But Black people are some of the most creative people throughout the entire world. So we're going to make it work. We're going to figure out a way to find joy in this. We're going to figure out a way to put flavor inside of this. We're going to figure out how to take this traumatic thing and turn it into something beautiful. But over time, throughout that generational trauma, we forget that, hey, this was just something that we were doing to try to survive. This wasn't what you were supposed to really be doing. So a lot of us have high blood pressure and diabetes and various forms of cancer that we could have and could be avoiding. And so that's generational trauma. It's passed down from generation to generation to generation.
Justin, you have a course called the 10 Common Hindrances of Success that I'm a part of. I recently signed up for, and where you talk about mental health, addictions, and the misuse of universal laws, amongst other hindrances to success. Why did you create this course, first of all? And also, why should people listening in take a part of this course as well?
I created the course because I wanted help to be accessible, especially for Black people. We talked about therapy to an extent within this conversation. And folks will often say, hey, well, why don't folks go to therapy? Have you ever looked at the cost of it? So many times we'll tell a person who's depressed about finances to go and spend more money that they may or may not have in order to get help for it. And so many times the solution that we're giving is out of reach for a lot of people, just at least in their current predicament. And so I wanted to create something that was accessible, that was affordable, that was also going to cut out a lot of the fat and fluff around how to become better or how to help yourself, and really something that's direct. And so with the 10 common hindrances of success, it's removing a lot of the fat from just making changes in your life and just focusing on things that can start to immediately help you. And so that was what really inspired me to create the 10 common hindrances of success.
The Turks and Caicos Islands. No, thank you so much for sharing that with me. And we are winding down a bit, so we have a few more questions to hit you with.
For sure.
We recently went through one of our darkest periods here in this country. The Turks and Caicos went through a huge crime surge where we witnessed and saw a lot of gun-related homicides. Historically, this has never been the case in our communities. Yeah, you come from a country where this is kind of I don't want to say a norm, but it happens a lot, these gun-related crimes. Can you shed some light on how or why this happens so much in the U.S. and also some possible solutions to this issue in our communities?
For sure.
Yeah.
So first I would ask or pose the question of in what communities specifically have those events occurred, at least in bulk or the majority of them? Are they like lower class communities, middle class communities, upper class communities? That would be one of my first questions.
Majority of the crimes took place in the lower class communities, or the homicides.
Understood. And that's essentially that's an answer that I would expect, because many times poverty and crime go hand in hand, and it can be easy to focus on just the mentality of people, or to make it a mental issue. But a lot of times the crimes that are occurring are really an issue of poverty. And so we'll focus on crime when really oftentimes will be far more effective if we focus more at the root, and the root tends to be poverty. There's a quote that says, poverty is the worst form of oppression. And so many times people are in such a state of struggle. Poverty can create madness in the mind. It's just such a high level of pressure.
I want to mention this, because you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned poverty, and when I think of poverty, I'm thinking about the people being poor and no access to opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities in these communities, Justin. I can tell you, if these guys want to earn $250 a day in the Turks and Caicos Islands, it is possible. So when you talk about poverty, what are you talking about?
Of course, it's possible. It is possible. Though at the same time, you need people in those spaces to point out not only that it's possible, but how it can be achieved. And not everyone's gonna have that influence or that vision or even be in a mental mindset to be able to see what's going on around them. For example, some of the wealthiest people in the world are depressed. And many times depression is your mind playing tricks on you. You can't see the opportunities that are in front of you. You can't see what you have access to. You can't fully see the people that love you and all these great things that you have going on, because like it's something going on in your mind. And so you can be in a state of poverty just like you can be in a state of love and not see what exactly is before you. So yeah.
Indeed. I could tell you that, the Turks and Caicos is we have, there are opportunities here. And like you say, maybe it's that generational trauma that's seeping in, mental health. I think, in those cases, there is a holistic approach that we have to take when we're looking at these communities. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I wanted to add something as far as it's important for people to have hope and to have hope is so important. Hope and being able to see that there's other ways, and like not just the hope that you give a person where it's not real. Like people need to see real opportunities. They need to see a real path of happiness. They need to see real ways out. In America or the United States of America, the drug penalties are extremely harsh, and that goes into the war on drugs and also very strategic things that have been done to strive to just impact communities of color. But many of these people get into desperate states and they do desperate things because they don't see other ways out that they actually see themselves in. And it's important, especially coming from an educated, and I put quotes on educated because there's different forms of knowledge and there's different forms of information. And we get into the habit of looking down on poorer groups as if they don't know things. But many times they know extremely valuable things. It's just applying in a different area.
Right.
But we'll get our university degrees. We'll get to a certain place of relative comfort financially, and we'll forget that there's certain people that just don't know how to maneuver the way that we maneuver.
Indeed. That is true.
What looks simple to us, and when I say us, I'm really just speaking for anyone. What may look simple to us as an individual may be something that another person finds extremely difficult. It's just like mentorship. Like many people they'll say, "Oh, I can't be anybody's mentor. I don't know anything." You know a whole lot. It's just that the stuff that you know, it comes off as so simple and so apparent to you that it doesn't even cross your mind that may be a great struggle or lack of understanding for another person. So it takes people from different groups being able to show that, hey, there are ways out. There's avenues. You can have the avenues and not see it, and that's just mentally it affects you just the same as if you didn't have any at all. And, knowing that you actually have genuine access to better, that creates a hope, and that affects mental health, that affects the movements that a person makes. And I mentioned the drug war in America in the midst of this because folks don't want to sell drugs for fun. It's a very risky job. You're putting your life on the line all the time. Though folks step into that space when they feel like they have nothing better. So that's my take.
Justin, I know you're not a financial expert, right? But this show, the average citizen is listening in. And so I want you to speak from that, and the question I'm asking you is along the lines of what's going to happen in the US, which is pretty much guaranteed next year, which is a recession, right? All the experts are saying this is going to happen.
They're stating now that like we're officially in the recession as we speak. So
right.
We're definitely in a state of a recession.
What should we be doing in this recession with our finances, or even creating? I don't know, like what steps should we be taking? What should we be doing?
I mean, for starts, if you have a good job, hold on to it. That's for starts. If you have a good job, hold on to it. And yeah, just I would say go to a financial advisor if you can. But that's my main advice, And and the bigger one is similar to the pandemic. 2020, a lot of people had to create new forms of revenue. Yeah. I say the same thing now. It's before you're in a position to where it's extremely hard for you to adjust and take on new skill sets or have new avenues that you can step into. Start preparing. Pick up that skill set now. Go and learn how to step into just different lanes of business now, so that way your family is good. That's the main thing that I would say is don't wait until everything hits before you start trying to make moves. Be proactive. That's my biggest thing. Be proactive.
Be proactive.
And also we have so much access to information online. There's great platforms that are geared towards helping Black people like earn your leisure, which they focus on finance and economics specifically for Black people. I would say look them up, check into them. But that's my main advice. Hold on to the job you have right now,
right?
Because there is a wave coming, or a drought, whichever way you want to look at it. And also look into various different ways or avenues that you can make money. That way, you're not solely dependent on your job. If you are to lose your job, you and your family are prepared, and you still have other legs that you can stand on.
Indeed. Justin, thank you so much for being a guest on Trailblazing Chats and gracing the airways of the Turks and Caicos Islands. This has been a very insightful and empowering conversation. And I just have two more questions before you leave us. Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to say before we close?
In closing, I would just like to say, once again, prioritize your mental health. It's okay to be selfish. Many times when we think about the term selfish, it's a negative association. But no, you can't pour from an empty cup. And sometimes you have to put yourself first so that you're even in a position to be there for others. Because if you don't do that, then you're not able to pour at all. And you also have to think about if you go empty, who's going to pour into you? So be selfish where it's applicable. That's selfish is not a bad word. Sometimes being selfish is needed. It's a real necessity. And then secondly, just for myself, if anyone needs me for conferences, or if anyone needs me to come out for various events or various community-based things, definitely feel free to contact me via justinblu.com. Would love to interact and really just build with you or other groups of people that you feel like I would be an asset to. So it's much love from this end.
Indeed. And I definitely will be sharing your social media contacts and also your contact information with the audience as well. Justin, thank you so much. This interview has been really helpful, very inspiring, very insightful. And, you know, as a trailblazer, because this is Trailblazing Chats, as a trailblazer, what trail are you creating for future generations?
It's so many layers to this. I'm gonna take a broader approach. I could go more specific, but the trail that I'm trailing is it's twofold. One is that we're all here for a specific purpose. There is no one like you that has ever existed, and there is no one like you that will ever exist again. Your biological makeup, the way you think, everything, your life experiences, everything about you, only you have existed and will exist in this form. So it's very important for you to be yourself. That person that you look up to, or those people that you look up to, one morning they had to wake up and say, I'm going to be me. And so if you pass away, or at your funeral, you know, the day's coming for us all, if someone gets up on the podium and they say, this person was just like so-and-so, then you didn't do your job. Your job is to be you. So you're here for a great purpose that only you can fulfill. And it's so important for you to be unapologetically yourself as much as possible, because you have so many great things about you and within you that you need to bring forth to the world to make your family and the world and the universe a greater place. So that's the message that I'm pushing behind everything that I have going on. Like, that is the overarching or the underlying message on everything that I put my energy into, is just the importance of that. You're working for something greater than yourself, and you need to make sure that you allow yourself to be yourself.
Allow yourself to be yourself. Be the change that you want to see. I love it. Justin, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on Trailblazing Chats. Thank you, Turks and Caicos, for tuning in to an amazing episode. And I'll allow Justin one more time to say goodbye. And again, thank you, bro, for this amazing discussion.
Thank you, Turks and Caicos, for just taking a moment to sit down with us and tuning in and listening. It's so much love from my end to your end, and I can't wait to make it out that way. Much, much, much love.
Do expect an invitation. Do expect us to give you a call, because we want to hear you here in the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Well, I'll be waiting on it. I'll be waiting.
Audience, thank you so much for listening to another amazing episode of Trailblazing Chats. I'm your host, Leo Lightburn, and we had with us today Justin Blue. I will definitely be sharing his social media links on my social media. So come to my page where you'll be able to get access to him and also his website and social media handles. Take care, Turks and Caicos. We'll see you next time on Trailblazing Chats.
Yeah. Bro said watch everyone that's around you, them boys that you keep around ain't your G's. I told bro that my face card good like US money in the West Indies. They won't talk about cash, but long time since cash been king. I'm doing 419 straight P's, hundreds in the trap, real G's rave me. Some man won't blow trees, but word on the street is you broke, but we don't give off good leave for free. So even the ops get things off me. The man want